Welcome back to Family Recipes with Amanda. We have a really exciting day coming up next week. It's my son Alex's birthday, and per his request, I am making a super fudgy buttermilk chocolate cake with some mint buttercream frosting for his birthday. So I'm going to show you how to put that together today. So this cake recipe makes a 2-layer cake, sometimes a 3-layer cake, depending on the size of your cake pans. And so that would be a 9-inch round cake pan like this right here. But Alex's specific request is he wants a ball-shaped cake, and you'll see why at the end of the video. But anyway, so I have these 2 half-sphere pans right here. So I'm going to use these pans to make the cake. So I want to make sure I have enough cake batter because I'm doing the rounds and a 9-inch pan. I want to make sure that I have enough batter. So I'm going to make 1.5 times the amount of cake. So I will, as I go through the explanation, I'll tell you what the original is, and then I'll show you that I'm adding in the extra half measure of each ingredient for the cake. And then at the end, I'll put in just the regular original recipe for everybody. So here we go. So just like always, I have preheated my oven to 350 degrees. And we, just like I said in the original muffin recipe, we always want to mix our dry and our wet ingredients separately. So I've already started sifting in some of the dry ingredients, and I'm just going to continue adding to those as we go. All right, here we go.
So this recipe calls for flour, cocoa powder, baking soda, salt, and sugar in our dry ingredients. So I already have in here 3 cups of all-purpose flour and 4 teaspoons of baking soda and a cup of cocoa powder. So I've already got the original dry ingredients for those items in here. So I'm going to show you how to sift the rest of the ingredients in. So I have my sifter, which as you notice, I use quite a lot in the kitchen. And the reason we want to sift the ingredients in is because it just makes everything blend together so much nicer. So I just have some cocoa powder here, and I'm just gonna put it in a 1/2 cup measure because the original is 1 cup of cocoa powder. And so I'm adding my extra half for the extra half measure. And I just put it in there. And then I just pick up my sifter and I just hit it real gently with the side of my hand, and it sifts out all the lumps and bumps out of the cocoa powder. And when I get down to the end, you'll see there's, a whole bunch of little pebbles in there. So I'll just take the back of a spoon or a measuring cup and just sift them through. So there's no lumps and bumps in my recipe. So that was the cocoa powder. Now I need to add 2 more teaspoons of the baking powder, which is right here. So I already had a tablespoon plus a teaspoon is what the original recipe calls for. So if you remember, there's 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon. So that's 3 teaspoons plus 1 is 4 teaspoons. So half of 4 is 2. So I'm adding 2 more teaspoons of baking powder into my batter, and I'm just using the side of this can. They put that in there for a reason, so you can level out your baking powder. And I'll sift that in for the same reason I said in an earlier recipe, is you don't want little clumps of baking powder in your baked goods. That makes a bomb in there that unsuspecting folk will bite into, and it will not be tasty. Okay, so I actually have 3.5 cups of flour in here already because I was trying to use up some old cake powder or cake flour, and that was 1.5 cups. And then so I just need 1 more cup of flour in here. So the original recipe calls for 3 cups of flour. So I have 3.5 cups in here. So here's my 4th cup, and I should have sifted that, but I forgot, so it's all right. It will be okay. We're going to use a whisk to whisk this all together anyways.
So I'm going to use a rather special salt today. This was a gift from a friend of mine. This is fleur de sel, or sea salt in French. And it just, I don't know, I think it has a special little flavor to it that sort of makes all the other flavors in your baked goods pop. So I'm going to use this today just because it's a special occasion. But you know, you can use regular iodized salt, you can use kosher salt, you can use sea salt, whatever you use on a daily basis. So I need a half a teaspoon of salt. So I'm going to put my original half teaspoon in first, and then half of a half is a quarter. See, this is fun math with your kids during quarantine. You can make them do the recipe and do the math for you. Okay, so I've got my salt, sugar, flour, and cocoa powder in here. And the last ingredient I want to add to my dry ingredients is my sugar. So I need 2.5 cups of sugar for the original recipe. So we'll get into the fractions of that in a minute. I'm going to add my 2.5 cups of sugar here.
Okay, so original recipe calls for 2.5 cups of sugar. So what's half of 2.5? Well, 1 1/4. So I've already put 3 cups of sugar in here. So 1 1/4 plus 2.5 is 3 3/4. So I've already got 3 cups of sugar in here. I'm just going to put the last 3/4 in here. And this is a pretty cool measuring tool I have here. It's a 1 cup measure, but it's got all the different increments on it, and I can just slide my handle out so I don't have to dirty a bunch of measuring spoons. So you see I've got like this lump of sugar in here. I don't want that because that's extra. So I'm just gonna sort of break it up with my fingers a little bit. And in goes my sugar. Okay, so all the dry ingredients are in here, and I'm just gonna give it a stir to mix all those dry ingredients together. And again, I don't wanna be rough with it. I'm just folding and lifting and stirring very gently so that everything gets incorporated into a lovely dry powder.
Okay, we're ready to do our wet ingredients. So the first thing I'm going to do is put in vegetable oil or canola oil into this. Oil helps make this cake really moist. You know, you can use butter or coconut oil or something like that, but I don't think you'll get as good of a gooey, fudgy result in that if you do that. So I'm going to pour in 1 1/3 cups of vegetable oil into this. As you can see, we're at, you know, by the amount of sugar and flour that we've added, this is going to make a lot of batter. So, sorry, it disappeared there for a second. A trick that my mom taught me years and years ago when you're measuring wet ingredients like oil or milk is you want to make sure that it's on a level surface when you measure it so that that liquid comes exactly to the line, especially when you're baking. So I'm going to set this down so you can see my 1 1/3 cups.
Okay, so here's my measuring cup, and I am eye level with this. I'm crouched down on my floor, and you can see that the line of vegetable oil is not quite at 1 1/3. It's just a little bit low. So I'm just going to add a little bit more. And now it's truly at 1 1/3 cups. Okay, next step, I have to add half again the amount. So what's half of 4/3? 1 1/3 is 3/3 plus 1/3 is 4/3. See, fun with fractions. Okay, so half of 4/3 is 2/3. So I have to add another 2/3 cup. Well, 1 1/3 plus 2/3 brings me all the way up to 2 cups. So that's actually really quite easy math there. All right, so I'm just filling her up. It's really kind of hard to do that with one hand. All right, I'm at 2 cups of oil. Okay, next we're gonna add in our buttermilk. And those of you who have watched my earlier videos know that buttermilk can be made from regular milk plus some sort of acid such as vinegar or lemon juice. So, and I like to use my homemade whey that comes from my yogurt. So I'm going to substitute half of the buttermilk for whey in this recipe. So first I have to do my math. So 1 1/2 cups of buttermilk, okay, plus another, I got a half that. Okay, so that's 3/4 of a cup, so that's 2 1/4 cups. So it's not going to come out exactly half, so I'm just going to do a cup of the whey to start with. There we go. So I've got a cup of the whey, and I'm going to add 1 1/4 of my milk. That's beautiful. 1 1/4 of my milk. And then I'm gonna add a tablespoon of vinegar to go with my milk. Okay, it's time to mix the wet and the dry together. So I've got my my bowl of my dry ingredients in the stand mixer, and I'm gonna put it on stir, very low, 1 or 2 setting. And then I'm just gonna add my wet ingredients in until it's nice and combined. And then I put the coffee in last. And I've got 2 cups of coffee here. The original is 1.5 cups of coffee, so I really need 2 1/4. So I'll just add the extra quarter at the end as needed. All right. Okay, here we go. Very slowly adding in my wet ingredients. I don't want this to splash. Okay, so once I can see that there's really not any lumps in my batter, it looks nice and smooth, I'm just going to stream in my coffee very slowly. And it will be a very liquidy batter when I'm all done. See, it's already getting kind of sloshy, so I'm just going to turn it down. Don't be afraid that it is so liquidy. It will cook up, I promise you, into a light, airy, delicious chocolate cake, I promise. All right, I've got my 2 cups of coffee in there, strong black coffee in there. It looks like it's all mixed together, so I'm just gonna turn off my mixer and I will give it one last go around with the spatula. Yep, I can already feel that there's some dry ingredients down at the bottom that didn't incorporate. So that's why we check it with the spatula. And make sure everything's mixed together, and then I'll probably hook it back on again. All right, set that aside. All right, yeah, sometimes with these bowls, I think there's like a pocket at the bottom, and it just doesn't allow all the ingredients. They settle at the bottom, particularly when you've got a lot of batter. So there's nothing wrong with stirring it by hand until you get it how you want it. And actually, by mixing all those ingredients in, my batter's gotten quite a bit thicker, so I can add that extra 1/4 cup of coffee in without being afraid. So I'm going to let that mix for a second. All right, that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to stir it one more time, make sure I got all the lumps and bumps out of it, and then we'll put it into our prepared cake pans.
Okay, I've got my prepared cake pans here. Those of you who have watched the other videos before know that I always grease my pans with shortening and then spread them with a little bit of flour that I coat all the way around, because that keeps your cake from sticking. Now, I've got these 2 little round bottom spherical pans here that I'm going to use to make my ball cake. And there, you can see they're a little wobbly, so I'm going to be very careful and even use a measuring cup to help pour my batter in here, because I don't want it to tip over and wreck everything. So I just have a liquid measure here. I think it's going to be really helpful. So here we go.
Okay, so a little technical error. I had been thought I was recording, but I wasn't. So I have filled my spherical cake pans about 2/3 of the way full. I used a liquid measuring cup. It turned out to be about a cup of batter per, and I've got them on this sheet tray, and I'm gonna have to be very careful with them because I don't want them to overbalance and tip. And they're on that sheet tray so that if they bubble over or anything in the oven, they'll be, they won't, you know, make a mess in my oven. So now I'm just gonna pour about, again, halfway up maybe into this 9-inch round. Yeah, that looks like a good amount, because remember the cake is going to rise, and this is actually just going to be the base for my cake layer. So I'm just going to set the ball on top of this base. So, you know, and I'll even it out after it comes out of the oven. So that's it. I'm going to stick these in the oven for 25 to 30 minutes. The spherical pans might take a little bit longer to bake just because they're deeper. So I just, again, always watch your cakes in the oven. Don't take the recipe time as gospel. Watch your oven, check them, not too often, obviously, but so this recipe calls for 30 to 35 minutes in the oven. So again, I always set my temperature for the low, and then I will check it at 30 minutes and see how we're doing. Okay, talk to you later. Bye. Hi, I've got the cakes out of the oven now, and we are going to, I just wanted you to see what they look like so you kind of know if they're done or not. So here's my 2 rounds, which took just about 35 minutes. And you just stick a cake tester right in there and you pull it out and it's clean, comes out easy, and voila, they're ready to go. So now they've been cooling for about 15 minutes on this rack here. So I can take the sheet tray away, and then I'm going to try to unpan them. I'm just going to turn them over onto my cooling rack right here and sort of give them a little gentle tap all the way around, and hopefully they'll slide right out. Ha ha ha. No such luck. Oh, there we go. All right, so actually that turned out pretty well. And then I'll do this one same way, give it a little tap, and these are really flexible round, so I can kind of pull out the sides a little bit. There we go. Perfect. All right, not bad at all. Okay, so I'm gonna let them sit upside down here and cool the rest of the way. And then the next time what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna trim the bottom so it's nice and flat, and then I can use buttercream to put them together like a puzzle. All right, and I've got my other one over here, which is in the 9-inch cake pan, and it's still too hot. It's only been out about 10 minutes, so I can't touch the pot. That means it's not ready to come out yet. So anyway, you'll see what it looks like when it's all done, and the next step will be making the buttercream. All right.
Okay, it's time to make buttercream. So buttercream is the typical frosting that most people enjoy on cakes. It's really, really simple. So I have a stick of butter. 1 stick of butter is equal to a half a cup of butter. And it's right there, right on the package, you can see it. 8 tablespoons equals a half a cup of butter. And so this recipe calls for 1 cup of butter and 3 to 4 cups of powdered sugar, plus some milk and some extract. Now, mostly you would use vanilla extract, but in this particular case, the cake that I'm making a mint frosting because that was Alex's request. So I'm going to put a teaspoon of mint extract in there. And actually, it's probably a good idea to only put a half a teaspoon of mint extract in, because otherwise it can come out tasting a bit like toothpaste, and a half a teaspoon of vanilla. It's sort of just a subtle mint flavor. You don't want to use too much extract of any flavor. It comes off very fake tasting. Okay, so I'm gonna switch over to the mixer, and I'm gonna cream up my butter first and then slowly add my powdered sugar.
Okay, so before I even put the butter in the mixer, I'm gonna measure out my extracts and my heavy cream, because I wanna have them ready to go when I want it. This kind of goes fast and slow at the same time. So right now, I'm gonna just take 2 tablespoons of heavy cream, or whipping cream, and put it in a bowl. I like to pre-measure the ingredients and put them in the little bowls, like I said, and then everything's ready to go ahead of time and you don't have to think about it. And then as I said before, I'm going to take a half a teaspoon of vanilla and measure it into a bowl here, and a half a teaspoon of mint extract, and put it into a bowl because I don't want my buttercream to taste like toothpaste. That does not sound good to me. I don't know about you. Okay, so now we're ready to come over here to the mixer, and I have my 2 sticks for 1 cup of butter, and I'm gonna just unmold it and drop it in the blender. Now, this is room temperature butter. It has been sitting out for probably a couple of hours now, and that's something I always forget to do, is take the butter out ahead of time. You know, it's all those little pre things that we forget to do. So, you know, there's a couple of tricks for melting butter or softening butter ahead of time. Like, I've read that you can put it on like a warm plate and then stick a glass on top of it. I've tried it, haven't had a lot of success with it. Or I usually just put mine like on defrost in the microwave for about like 10 or 15 seconds, and then check it, and then another 10 or 15 seconds. And I find that works pretty well. So I'm just breaking up the butter here at first, and once it's broken up, I'm going to turn it up and let it cream for about 3 or 4 minutes. Okay, so I have been creaming together the butter and the powdered sugar here for a few minutes. So I just added the last bit of powdered sugar, and I'm gonna let it all come together. And then I'm gonna add in my extract for flavoring once it's all combined. There you go. All in there, it's all combined, nice and creamy. So I'm gonna add my flavorings, my vanilla and my mint extract. And then I'm going to add my heavy cream, and this will kind of thin it out, so I'm going to add a little bit at a time, like a tablespoon at a time. Okay, that's looking actually perfect. It looks nice and smooth and spreadable. As you can see here, I'll hold it up so you can see it's nice and smooth. And now I got to give it the taste test. Oh, it's perfect. It's just a light mint flavor. So that was the right thing to do, is just add a ½ teaspoon of mint. So now is the time that I need to color my butter.
Okay, let's talk about food coloring for a second. So most of you probably grew up with the little liquid jars of food coloring. Great for dyeing Easter eggs, great for dyeing liquids, that sort of thing. Not so great for achieving like deep, rich color for frosting or batter or anything like that. Much better, I find, are these gel food colorings. You can find in most places, at baking stores. I think Meyer has it, etc. Or you can order them online. And they're made by Wilton, is one company that makes them. That's what these are from. So, and the colors are very, very vibrant in them. You only need just like a tiniest little dash of it to get the right color. So the color I'm trying to achieve today is like a grayish, greenish blue. I know, very scientific. Okay, so I have blue, I have royal blue, I have Kelly green, and I have black. So I'm going to mix the blue and green first and see if I can get the right shade that I want. And then if I need it to be a little darker, I can just put like a speck of black in there. All right, so let's see how this goes. Wish me luck.
Okay, I'm ready to add color here. So I just need a little bit. So I like to just, it's very scientific. I just take the edge of like a steak knife and I just dip a little bit of color in there. It really, a little goes a long way. Now you're gonna kind of spread it in my frosting a little bit. Okay, and then I'm gonna do the same thing with a clean knife with the green, because I don't want to mix my colors. I don't want to dip the blue into my green. Then next time it won't be the right shade of green. So just a little. I mean, it's really just coating the knife here. And then if I need to, I also can just add more later. So I'm going to mix those together and see what kind of color I can achieve. Okay, so that's actually a really cool mint green color. I really like it. I do want it to be just the tiniest bit darker, and so I'm taking a little risk here. I'm just gonna add a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of black because I want it to be a little gray. And like I said, it's very concentrated color, so this is kind of a risk. Hopefully it is one that will pay off. Let's see how it goes. Maybe not enough. Also, my black is a little bit dried out, so I could add some water to it to make it go, but we'll see. Okay, that is exactly the color I was going for, so my risk paid off. I know, when you look at this, okay, when you see this, you're going to go like, ew, that's the grossest frosting color ever. It's like this horrible greenish blue, but that's actually the color I was going for. And when we get to the end, you'll know why. Okay, so I'm going to try to frost these spheres. They're cool enough that I can put the buttercream on without melting it all over the place. So you can see I trimmed the top off of this one because when I try to put them together, you know, I want them to sit as flat as possible. The buttercream is gonna fill in any gaps, but that's the way it is. Now there are these really awesome like cake cutting, like they're almost like a cheese slicer that you can use to cut the cakes nice and even. I don't have one of those, so I just use a really sharp serrated knife and try to eyeball it as best I can. So what I did is I just take the cake like this and I just keep it flat as best I can, and I don't want to push down too hard, and then I just go across the cake here and I've got a relatively flat surface. Now you can save those cake top pieces for other things, for filling in empty spots. I got a little unlevel bit here, so I'm going to shave that off, and there you go. I've got my cake spheres which are ready to put together, and I'm going to kind of test them so you can see how they'll make a nice ball. Yeah, it's like perfect, right? Right. Okay, so I got to get a stand to put this on, or a piece of cardboard or something sturdy to hold it on. And then I'm going to get out my offset spatula and I'm going to frost the cake. Okay, so I've done a light thin crumb coat layer on the bottom of each of these rounds. And now I'm just going to flip them over and stick them together. Boop. Slide them until they look like a good sphere. And I'm going to put them over here on my plate. And then I'm going to see if I can't crumb coat the outside of these. Crumb coating is just what it sounds like. I'm putting a light thin layer of frosting all around the cake to catch and trap all those crumbs. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a spatula and I just kind of put a blob of it on the top, and then I'll take an offset spatula. Offset means it looks like this, and I just sort of gently, as gently as you can, spread it all over the outside of the cake. Yeah, it's okay if some crumbs get stuck. It's okay if, you know, you can see a little bit of the cake through the crumb coat. We're going to cover that all up later. That is okay. And then, like when I squish the two pieces together, like some gaps and some, you know, kind of poked out at me. So I'm going to sort of fill those gaps as I go, so I have as smooth a dome as I can make. All right, I'm just going to keep working on this, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's all done.
So we're back. I put together some of the components to the cake. It's a multi-step process, and it's quite long, so I did kind of move ahead on some items here. So I took and I frosted the sphere. Now I will say I made a bit of a mistake on this, because I should have frosted the outsides first, let it harden, and then slid a board and put them together. And so it's flattened out a bit, my sphere, but I think it's still going to work out okay. And then over here, I have some fondant. So fondant is, you can buy it in the store. You can also make it yourself. Just like soft, marshmallowy frosting. It's moldable and rollable. And so I took some blue and green and white and a little bit of that black food coloring, and I molded it together, and I'm going to put it on top of my sphere here. So it looks like this smooth, flat surface of this round object that I have right here.
So I'm actually going to enrobe the whole thing. Normally I wouldn't do this, but my cake is kind of coming apart here a little bit. So I'm actually going to just wrap the whole thing in it very smoothly as best I can. Now fondant will not hide any mistakes. It will amplify them. But in this particular case of this cake, I don't really care if it's lumpy and bumpy, because what it is, I guess this is the big reveal, is it's kind of silly, but since we are under quarantine, this is a coronavirus cake. So this is like the model of the coronavirus that we've all grown quite familiar with. So I'm just kind of wrapping it, a little messy here, I know, and I'm trimming as I go. It's not going to be perfect. I don't care if it's not perfect. Normally I would be very cautious with this, but I don't care if it's a little bit messy at this point. So what I actually need is a pastry brush and a bowl of water. And you can use vodka too. I guess vodka sort of makes everything stick a little bit better. I don't know. I never really tried that. And then I'm just gonna sort of blend very gently with my fingers and sort of try to create a seam here. Okay, we don't want it to be too wet. We don't want it slipping around. Like I said, normally I would be a lot more careful with my seams, and we would tuck and roll. Maybe that's for another day, but right now I want it to be a little messy. I want it to look kind of lumpy, because that's what this virus looks like. So this didn't exactly turn out like I was hoping, but I think it's getting there. We're only about 3/4 of the way done. So I took my 3 cakes and I stacked them up together, and I put these little popsicle sticks, I put them down in the cake for dowels to support this heavy sphere, which, as I said before, my mistake, didn't turn out very spherical. I should have put a layer of cardboard support in between, but I didn't. So now what I'm doing is I just have a little bit of green paint here, and I've made little dots all over my fondant covered sphere, and I'm attaching them with this food paint. It's not regular paint. I guess I should probably make that clear. So that's what I'm doing.
Okay, so I've got my cake here, and I'm working on adding some of the details. So I covered it in fondant that I colored myself by mixing blue and green and white fondant together with a little tiny bit of black food coloring. I squished it and folded it, and so it's got these nice striations all over it. And then I had some silver luster dust left over in my baking bin from a previous cake that I did. So I kind of stuck some of that on there, flaked it so it would look a little kind of cool. And now I'm taking little tiny orange sprinkles, and I'm sticking them all over the cake using this cake paint that I have, that I bought from a long time ago, from a while back. And then you can see I stuck these spikes all over it. I'm not done with the cake. That's the last part that has to go. Is I'm going to make some treats that are going to be the red coney things that are on the end of the coronavirus, and I'm going to put those all around the outside. I'm thinking at this point it's going to be cereal treats, rice cereal treats. So they'll be like little little cake pops all over this virus that I've got going here. Okay, it's time for the final phase of Alex's COVID birthday cake. And I'm just gonna show you how to put the cake pops of the Rice Krispie treats into the cake.
So this is kind of how the cake turned out right here. I've got my Rice Krispie cake pops using some lollipop sticks I bought online, stuck into the cake. I had a little trouble with the Rice Krispie treats melting on me and kind of falling apart. So I put them in the refrigerator overnight, and I took some of the more troublesome ones off. Some of them didn't have any trouble at all, and some of them were great, so I don't really know. So all I did is I took some chocolate chips, melted them in the microwave, and I'm gonna double dip both ends of my stick, like so. Okay, I'm going to take a Rice Krispie treat. I think part of the problem is that I'm going horizontally into the cake pop, into the Rice Krispie treat instead of vertically. I think that's part of my problem. And then I'm going to just kind of stick it into the cake. And that's all you have to do. So I'm just filling in some of the holes here. And that's all there is to this COVID birthday cake.
I'm sorry if that bothers some of you or you think it's irreverent or disrespectful. It's really not meant to be. It's just trying to have some fun with my son's birthday cake. You know, it's kind of sad and disappointing that he has to have his birthday without his friends, without a party. And so I was just trying to make a little fun. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you make this cake or something like it in the future. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, everybody.